My name is Sarah Matthews. I'm 28, a freelance graphic designer living in Portland. For the past 3 years, I've taught myself how to sleep alone without jolting awake in the middle of the night. I survived the worst breakup of my life and rebuilt everything from scratch. No family, no best friends, no Evan. Until my mom called. This Christmas will be different. "Sweetheart," she said over the phone, her voice cracking like it came from someplace fragile. "Your dad misses you. I miss you too. Come home. Please." I almost said no. I had drafted a dozen excuses not to return to the place that once suffocated me in silence. But then she said, "We need to heal." And something soft inside me stirred. So I booked the ticket. One way, no promises to return. Snow blanketed Denver as my flight landed the afternoon of December 23rd. My Uber driver cracked a joke about the weather being as cold as his ex's heart. I didn't laugh. I just stared out the fogged-up window at the twinkling red and green lights strung across the neighborhood. My parents' house looked exactly the same wreath on the door, that oversized plastic Santa statue towering like a sentry on the lawn, and the white letters still lit up along the roof. Home for the holidays. I stepped out of the car with my small suitcase, my heart pounding like I was walking into a courtroom. No amount of preparation could mute the feeling of estrangement. The front door flew open. My mom, Evelyn, pulled me into a hug so tight I had to step back. "Oh, Sarah, you're finally here. I was afraid you'd never come back." I forced a smile. I wasn't sure I would. My dad, Gerald, came out from the living room, still in his maroon Broncos sweater. "There's my girl," he boomed. "You look healthier than your mom said. I'm fine." I replied, gripping my suitcase like it was the only thing keeping me grounded. "Evan's gonna be thrilled to see you." I froze. Evan then, like a bad dream rerun. I heard footsteps from the kitchen, and there he was, holding a tray of freshly roasted turkey, a glued-on smile stretching across his face. "Sarah," I went numb. He looked exactly the same. Tall frame, shirt unbuttoned just enough to look like a cologne ad, and those eyes the ones I once thought held the whole world. The same eyes that dragged me into hell. "I didn't think you'd come," he said, his voice sugary, poisonous. I didn't answer. My hands trembled, my chest tightened. Evan reached out to us. My mom chimed in, speaking as if she were announcing a surprise guest. "He's been in therapy, joined a support group. He writes me letters every month." "I believe he's really sorry." "I don't," I said. Eyes locked on him. My dad stepped closer, laying a hand on my shoulder. "Sweetheart, this is a time for family." Evan made mistakes, but people deserve second chances. I looked at them, two people who once were my sanctuary, now using Christmas as an excuse to forgive the man who once pinned me by the throat in a bathroom, who haunted my nights for years, who forced me to change states, change numbers, change my entire identity. "They said you're too skinny," Mom murmured, like changing the topic would fix anything. "I made your favorite roast." Evan cooked the turkey. I wanted to hurl my suitcase across the floor. Scream, but I didn't. I asked one question. "Why didn't anyone tell me he'd be here? Because I knew you wouldn't come if you knew." My mother admitted. I went silent. He stared at me, eyes laced with something that felt like a dare. I nodded. "I'm going to my room." The old wooden stairs creaked under my feet. Every step echoed with memories. I thought of that Christmas Eve 3 years ago when he dragged me away from the dinner table because I laughed at one of his cousin's jokes. When I cried in front of everyone, telling them he'd choked me until my face turned purple. When Mom said, "You must have done something to provoke him." When Dad handed me a tissue without saying a word. I didn't cry, not tonight. I stepped into my old room, the navy curtains I hated still hung at the windows. The shelf still held a photo of me and Evan from back then. I turned it face down. I sat on the bed and took a deep breath. Laughter drifted up from downstairs. He was cracking jokes with my parents like nothing ever happened. I knew I shouldn't be here. But I also knew this: if they wanted me to face the past, then they were going to face the truth. I'm not the weak girl I used to be. Not this time. Christmas morning in Denver was cold enough that my coffee steamed like fog. I sat at the kitchen table in an old hoodie, hands wrapped around the mug, staring blankly at the oven's reflection of his face. Evan stood beside my mother, chatting and laughing about the Bake Off holiday edition like he wasn't the very reason I fled this family. Mom wore an apron that read, "Bless this kitchen," busy mixing dough for gingerbread cookies. Evan, meanwhile, was slicing cinnamon-dusted apples like some wholesome family chef. They looked like the textbook mother-in-law and son-in-law duo in a Macy's holiday ad. All that was missing was the truth I had never forgiven him. "Did you sleep okay?" Mom asked, turning toward me with a hopeful smile. "Fine," I replied flatly, making no effort to hide the chill in my tone. Evan set the knife down and wiped his hands with a red dish towel. Still a night owl. Just like the old days. I didn't answer, just shot him a glance. A small scar peeked out beneath the cuff of his sweater, the one I left during the last time I fought to break free from him. For a fleeting moment, I saw his eyes flick toward me, and I knew the monster was still in there, just dressed in wool and fake redemption. "Evan told me he tried apologizing through email, but you never responded," Mom said, her voice laced with subtle reproach. "I don't consider a one-sided apology sincere." "Mom," I said calmly. "Sarah." My dad called out from the living room where ESPN was humming on the TV. "You've got to learn to let things go. Nobody's perfect, and I'm supposed to be the one who suffers for that imperfection." I turned to face him. "I told you what happened. 3 years ago, no one believed me. And now I'm supposed to sit here smiling over gingerbread with the guy who threw me into a wall." Silence gripped the kitchen. Mom set the mixing bowl down. Evan froze mid-motion. "No one's asking you to forgive him overnight," Mom murmured. "We just want a peaceful holiday." "It's Christmas Eve." I let out a laugh, cold, sharp. Even I flinched at the sound. "Peaceful." When you're baking cookies with the man who told me if I ever left, he'd make me a joke to the whole family. When you let him into your home, sit him in Dad's chair, and expect me to call him an old friend, Sarah. Enough. My dad snapped. "You don't have to make everything so dramatic all the time." Dramatic. It felt like someone scooped my heart out with a spoon. My sister Lucy shuffled down the stairs just then, hair still tangled, cream robe dragging behind her. She poured herself a glass of orange juice and sat down, her eyes brushing past me before quietly looking away. She knows, I thought. Lucy knew everything. She'd seen the bruises on my arms. She'd heard the screaming matches in the garage. And she stayed quiet. Just like Mom, just like Dad. "I'm just trying to understand," Lucy muttered, barely audible. "Maybe he really has changed. Why is it always the men who get the benefit of the doubt?" I whispered, "And the ones they hurt are left to deal with it alone." No one answered. I stood up. "I need some air." Mom called after me. "Sarah, things were going so well," I turned to her. "So well, take a good look." "Mom, who exactly is the outsider here?" I walked outside. Morning sunlight bounced off the snow, making my eyes sting. I stood by the wooden fence and drew a deep breath. Next door, a neighbor was stringing more Christmas lights. A little boy in a pom-pom beanie ran past, laughing. Part of me wanted to cry, but I didn't have any tears left for this. I pulled out my phone, opened my email, searched for Evan. Over 20 messages, from him, from last year, apologies, pictures of flowers, of kittens, or even a voice note of him crying. But one name in the top corner caught my eye, from Evan Lander's Evan La Greenridge Church, or Greenridge Church, my parents' church. The one they volunteer at. The one the entire community trusts. I opened the email. Attached was a video, a testimony, supposedly of repentance. In it, Evan sat with the pastor, claiming God has healed my soul, that I've forgiven Sarah for the pain she caused me. He flipped the script, said I had abused him. Blood rushed to my face, my fingers trembled, my heart pounded like funeral drums. He didn't just want to apologize, he wanted to reclaim control. He was rewriting the story, bending it in his favor so my own family would doubt me. And they had. I turned back to the house. The Christmas tree shimmered through the front window. Evan stood next to it, smiling like he wasn't the nightmare that shattered my life. If they wouldn't believe me through words, then they'd believe me through the truth. A plan began to form in my mind, not just to protect myself, but to make sure no one else ever had to live in fear like I did. Christmas dinner unfolded under candlelight, laced with fake laughter and the rich aroma of gravy that couldn't quite smother the bitterness boiling inside my chest. Evan sat at the head of the table across from me, wearing a crisp white dress shirt, buttoned all the way to the collar, like he was about to deliver a sermon at some church potluck. My mother sat beside him, piling food onto his plate like he was the son she never had. "Mrs. Evelyn's cooking is still top tier," he said in that low, syrupy voice that made my stomach turn. "Oh, Evan, you're too kind. Eat up. Sweetie, you're skinnier than Sarah now." My mom giggled. I set my fork down. "Funny. Mom, 3 years ago, I lost weight from stress. But I guess now it's just a competition." Huh. The table went quiet. Mom chuckled nervously. "Sarah, it's Christmas. And we're all just pretending nothing ever happened." I stared Evan straight in the eye, like it was just a minor misunderstanding. My dad cleared his throat. "It's not about pretending, we're trying to move past it." Evans apologized. I haven't heard a single apology from him. Evan set his wine glass down and turned to me, a pained expression draped over his face like a borrowed costume. "Sarah, I'm truly sorry for what happened between us. I was a different person back then, and you tried to choke me unconscious in the bathroom because I answered a phone call from a coworker. That's what happened between us." Lucy, sitting beside me, flinched. Her hand trembled slightly as she clutched her napkin. "Sarah," she whispered, panicked. "No." I said, cutting her off. "Let me speak. All of you are sitting here eating turkey, drinking wine, exchanging gifts with him. The man who cost me 3 years of therapy, 2 years of insomnia, and over 10 job applications because I had to flee Portland to stop him from following me." Evan looked away, face flushing red, but he stayed quiet. "Sweetheart." My mother exhaled. "I know you're hurting, but I believe Evan's changed. He's found faith. He shared his story with the entire church. He's not the same man." I looked at her, the same woman who once told me I was too sensitive, and now she believed a man who could cry on command in front of a pastor. "Have you ever listened to me, Mom? Not his tears, not the emails he sent you. Have you ever looked at the bruises on my back?" The table froze. No one said a word. I stood up. "Sorry, I've lost my appetite." I walked toward the kitchen, just before turning down the hallway. I stopped and turned back. "Oh, and by the way, Mom, you might want to know Greenridge Church is investigating Evan. A few other women have come forward. One of them, the pastor's ex-wife." My dad's wine glass slipped and clinked against the table. Lucy's mouth dropped open. "I don't have time to keep playing perfect family with you people," I said, my voice soft but sharp. I stayed silent long enough, and not this time. I turned and walked away, my heartbeat thundering louder than the Christmas music still humming from the Bluetooth speaker. I woke at 2:37 of May. No sounds and no music, no footsteps. The house was pitch black, except for a faint glow from the Christmas tree seeping through the crack beneath my bedroom door. I sat up, my back drenched in sweat. In the dream I just had, Evan stood at the foot of my bed and whispered, "I told you, if you don't keep your mouth shut." I gripped my phone and took a deep breath. Then I stood, gently cracked my door open, and stepped out. He was passed out on the living room couch. One arm dangled limp over the edge, one leg propped up on a throw pillow, mouth slightly open. His phone lay next to him, its screen faintly lit, still active. I hadn't planned to do this, but the thought came clear and sharp, like a beacon in the dark. It's time to find out what he's still hiding. I crept forward. The phone screen was dim, but still on. A group chat flashed across it. Greenridge Men's Circle. The latest message read, Jason bro, you still got that clip of the pastor drunk off his ass. I froze. I slid my finger up. No Face ID, no passcode. He felt safe enough to be careless. Classic Evan, only cautious when there's something to be afraid of. I opened his messages, scanned through names and threads, then I found a conversation labeled Vic S. Church law. The first line glared at me. Evan, if this goes public, I'll be removed, right? I tapped into the thread. Audio files, one nearly 4 minutes long. Evan speaking with a man named Vic, strategizing how to bury a sexual misconduct investigation happening at Greenridge Church. He wasn't just an abuser, he was an accomplice. My hands began to shake. I opened the photo gallery. He had everything: videos of our old fights in the living room, clips of him yelling, then cutting to himself crying, saying she hit me. A carefully edited mess, built to flip the story on demand. I airdropped it all to my laptop, then erased the transfer trail, and then I saw it, a folder labeled S Raw. My heart thundered. I opened it. Photos of me taken secretly, in the bathroom, in the bedroom, even while I slept. Timestamps showed they were taken in the last days before I left him. Images I never knew existed. Images that turned my body to stone. There was a video, shaky, grainy, but clear me, panicked, pushing him off me. I stopped there. I couldn't watch anymore. I closed everything, placed the phone back exactly where it had been, walked away. The tears unstoppable now? Upstairs. My legs felt numb. I shut my bedroom door softly, but inside me, something massive had just burst open. Evan wasn't just my past. He was a biohazard waiting to detonate, and I was the only one holding the key. I crept back downstairs and the TV was on screensaver. I plugged a USB into the port behind it and cued the video to favorites. One press of a button, and the truth would unspool. I stepped back, remote in hand, my grip tight. For the first time in 3 years, I felt calm. Not because it was over, but because I was ready to begin again. Not with forgiveness, with truth. The next morning, something in the air had changed. Mom baked cookies like every other year, but her face was tense. Lucy sat stiff on the sofa. Dad just stared at the TV in silence. Evan smiled like always, but I caught at the glance he shot my way, like he suspected something. Sleep well, he asked, voice steady. Like a baby, I said, smirking. You any sweet dreams, Huss? He blinked, a flash of unease. I set a Christmas card on the dining table. No one knew what was inside. This is my gift, I said, for the whole family. Mom paused. A card. What is it? Just a little memory. I smiled. We'll play it after dessert. I think everyone will be impressed. Evan opened his mouth to speak, but I cut in. Relax. You're featured too. Lucy looked up at me, eyes wide, panicked, but this time, I didn't look away. I wanted her to see every silence comes with a price. Evening. The whole family gathered around the TV as tradition dictated. Mom had just cleared away the butter pudding. Dad poured more bourbon. Evan sat at the center, one hand resting neatly on a pillow like some perfect gentleman. I picked up the remote, selected the file. The screen went black, then simple white text appeared. A Christmas of Truth. Evan flinched. What the hell is... Then his voice boomed from the speakers. I didn't hit her. I held her down. She was paranoid. I had to do something to protect myself. She needed to be warned. Mom dropped her wine glass. Lucy covered her mouth. Dad shot to his feet. Next came the audio of Evan's conversation with the church attorney confessing to covering for the pastor. Then screenshots of threatening messages to women, manipulative emails, the two-faced confessions. And finally, the blurred photos from S. Raw, faces removed. But the timestamps and layout unmistakable. It was my apartment. There was no denying it. No one could say, I didn't know. Sarah, where did you get this? Mom gasped, face pale. Evan exploded, but this is fake. She hacked my phone. She's setting me up. I just stood there. Calm, remote in hand. I didn't have to fake anything. I said, "You recorded it. You saved it." I just hit play. He lunged, but my father stepped between us. "Get out of my house," he growled. "Now, you sick bastard." My mother collapsed into the armchair. Lucy burst into tears. I exhaled slow and full as if 3 years of weight finally left my chest. And behind me, sirens began to howl. "Police, right on time. Step back, hands where we can see them." Two uniformed officers entered the living room, red and blue lights from the squad car still flashing through the window. Evan stood frozen. His face, flushed red and ghostly pale all at once, almost matched the fireplace tiles behind him. "Wait, she violated my privacy," he yelled, pointing straight at me. "She hacked my phone. She faked all that stuff. We've received complaints from 3 other victims." The first officer said calmly, producing a paper with an official seal. "This emergency warrant was granted tonight. Your family member's evidence only confirms the severity." I stood beside the Christmas tree, still holding the remote in my hand. I hadn't even set it down yet. "Sarah, is this real?" Lucy whispered, barely able to form the words. I turned to her, voice quiet but unwavering. "Did you think he only did this to me?" Evan snapped. "She's insane. She's just mad because I didn't want her anymore." The officers cuffed him swiftly. He flailed like a fish caught in a net. "Mom, Dad, say something. I'm a good person. I came here for you." My mother didn't move. She sat motionless on the couch, eyes glued to the now black screen of the TV. My father, standing by the fireplace, still holding his untouched glass of bourbon, simply muttered, cold as the snow outside, "There's no place in my family for monsters." As they dragged Evan out the front door, I rose slowly and picked up the USB stick from the table, slipping it into my pocket. Part of me expected to feel triumphant, but there was nothing, just a hollow stillness, like someone had finally removed the last brick sealing off the escape route in my mind. I had waited 3 years for them to see the truth. Now they had. No one touched the butter pudding after dinner. Lucy sat alone in the dining room, staring at nothing. I walked in and pulled out a chair beside her. "You knew, didn't you?" I asked. She jumped. "No, I mean, not everything. But you said things and I didn't know who to believe. Evan was so perfect." "No," I cut in. "He wasn't perfect. He was just good at performing." Lucy didn't cry, but her eyes were red. She bowed her head and whispered, "You've been stronger than anyone in this house." I placed my hand on the table between us. Not because I wanted to be, because I had no other choice. Mom knocked on my door close to midnight. I was packing. The USB had been backed up 3 times. My laptop was zipped away in my carry-on. I knew I wouldn't be staying long. She stood in the doorway, dark circles under her eyes, holding a small envelope in one hand. "This was supposed to be your gift tomorrow morning, but I figured you wouldn't want to stay that long." I didn't take it right away. I just looked at her. "I'm sorry," she said hoarsely. "I know that probably feels cheap right now, but I really am sorry I didn't believe you. I just wanted to believe things could still be okay. I didn't want to admit that. I failed." I bit my lip. She failed. The words felt real. For the first time, she wasn't making excuses. She wasn't defending anyone. She wasn't shifting blame. I gave her a slight nod, not forgiveness, but acknowledgement. She left. I opened the envelope. Inside was an old photo me in high school, wearing a prom dress, smiling wide under the Christmas lights in the front yard. On the back, in her handwriting, it read, "I always hoped you'd become this girl again, but maybe you became something even stronger." I folded the photo and tucked it into my wallet, then zipped my suitcase shut. The next morning, I left before the sun rose. The Christmas tree was still lit, but the red bulbs had turned amber in the breaking dawn. Lucy came out to see me off. My father stood at the door, silent. As I walked past him, he gave me a small, clumsy nod, but it was enough. in the back seat of the Uber. I turned to look at the house one last time. No one stood at the door, no waves, no tears. But I didn't need any of that, because for the first time in 3 years, I wasn't leaving in pain. I was leaving because I had reclaimed my voice. And I knew what came next would be even bigger. A week later, the news spread like wildfire. I was sitting in my temporary month-to-month rental in Eugene, Oregon, where I'd moved to lay low when my phone rang. Unknown number, Colorado area code. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something in my gut said pick up. A woman's voice came through, cautious but firm. Ms. Matthews, this is Detective Ramirez from the Denver Police Department. I'm overseeing the case involving Evan Landers. We've received several new reports since the footage you provided was leaked. You may have helped more people than you realize. I wasn't sure whether to feel proud or furious. Part of me wanted to scream I told you 3 years ago. But now, maybe the only thing that mattered was that people were finally listening. That night, the CBS Evening News ran the story as a special segment. A man once hailed by his church as a model of redemption is now facing multiple allegations of abuse and manipulation, starting with his ex-girlfriend. They blurred my face in the footage, but my voice stayed whole. I stayed silent long enough, not to destroy him, but to protect the ones who might come next. 3 days after the broadcast, I got an email from a girl named Madeline, 22 years old. She'd dated Evan through a Bible study group the year before. She told me about the controlling texts, the nights he showed up unannounced, the threats wrapped in so-called moral warnings. I thought it was just me. Madeline wrote, but because of you, I know I'm not crazy. I read that line again and again, and then I broke down crying, not for her, but because, in that moment, I finally believed something I hadn't dared to admit in 3 years. I wasn't crazy. I never was. Back in Denver, my family began to fall apart at the seams. Lucy texted me, Mom and Dad barely speak now. Mom quit the church group. She can't stand hearing people call Evan a psychological predator. I didn't know how to feel. Part of me thought they deserved the mess. But another part, a small, stubborn part, just felt sad. I didn't need that family anymore. But the memory of them still lived in my blood. On January 5th, I got a surprise call from a blocked number. The voice was older, gravelly. Sarah Matthews. This is Reverend Paulson, former pastor of Greenridge Church. I said nothing. I want to apologize. He continued. I defended Evan for far too long, even when I'd heard the whispers. But thanks to you, I can't hide behind silence anymore. You did what someone nearly 30 years older was too afraid to do. I didn't know what to say. So I told the truth. I didn't do it for the church. I did it for me. His voice softened. And because of that, you may have saved the church too. A week later, I received a handwritten letter. I recognized the handwriting instantly, my mother's. Dearest Sarah, I know I have no right to ask for your forgiveness, but I want you to know I've started over, in my own way. I'm sorry I believed in the image of a kind young man instead of the truth my own daughter was telling me. I wrote this during a support group session I now attend every Friday to learn how to own my mistakes without defensiveness. You don't have to write back, but if you're reading this, just know I believe you. I believe too late, but I do believe you. I folded the letter and placed it in the wooden box beside my bed. I didn't write back. I didn't call. But I turned on the heater that night, and for the first time since leaving Denver, I allowed myself to sleep with the lights off. By the end of January, I was invited by Women Rise to consult on a new media campaign, Survivors Who Spoke First. I stood under the hot lights of the studio, mic clipped to my collar. The interviewer asked Sarah, if you could go back to that moment, say one thing to your family, what would it be? I pressed my lips together. Then I looked straight into the lens. I'd say when your daughter stands in front of you, trembling, telling you horrible things, and the only thing you can offer is silence. You don't just make her lose faith in the world, you make her lose faith in herself. The interviewer said nothing, just gave a small nod. I unclipped the mic, walked outside. Snow was falling gently. And I felt it then, each flake, like an apology I no longer needed. I had reclaimed the truth. And no one, nothing, could take it from me again. 3 months later, on an early spring afternoon in Oregon, I stood in front of the red brick building of the Everlight Center for Survivors, where I had just accepted a full-time position as communications coordinator. I wasn't the Sarah from 3 years ago, the girl with a ripped suitcase and eyes that never stopped scanning her surroundings. Now, I was Sarah Matthews, 28, a survivor, once buried, now rebuilding. And finally telling my story not just for me, but for anyone who needed to know they weren't alone. In a small meeting room, I introduced myself to a new batch of volunteers. Some were younger than me, some older. All of them came with their own reasons. I told them my story, not the version you'd see on TV. Not the clips circulating online, but the raw truth that I'd once been isolated inside my own home, betrayed by people who shared my last name, and doubted simply because I dared to speak. No one interrupted, no one judged, everyone listened. At the end, a red-haired girl approached me. Her name was Kira, 19. She hesitated for a moment before saying, "You're the reason I applied here." I blinked, why I dated someone in the worship band at my old church. She said quietly, "He never hit me. But he controlled everything, what I wore, what I said, where I went, what I ate. When I told my mom, she said that's just what real men do. I thought I was overreacting. Until I saw your video, I took her hand, said nothing, but inside me, something warm flowed through like a spring thaw melting through years of frost. I used to crave revenge, but now I understood justice isn't just putting someone in prison. Justice is when a girl like Kira no longer believes she's crazy. In mid-April, I got another letter, not from my mother, from my father. "Sarah, I don't know where to start. I don't know why I believed Evan so easily. Maybe because he said the things I wanted to hear, that you were too sensitive, too strong, too self-sufficient. But it turns out, your strength is what kept you alive. And me, I was just a coward. I don't ask for your forgiveness. I only hope that someday. If you have a daughter, you'll be different from me. And if that day comes, I hope I get to stand far off, quietly watching you teach her to be strong, the way you once taught yourself." I didn't cry. But I printed the letter, laminated it, and tucked it into the last slot of my wallet. Not because I forgave him, but because I wanted to remember how far I'd come. The first day of Evan's preliminary hearing took place inside the cramped quarters of the Denver County Courthouse. I wasn't required to attend, but I flew back anyway, not for him, for the others. I entered the courtroom just as they brought Evan in, still in handcuffs. He looked thinner, his hair was cropped short, his face hollowed out. But the eyes, those same eyes, still held that familiar arrogance, that manipulation, that refusal to feel remorse. I didn't look away. When the judge asked, would any of the victims like to speak, I stood. "My name is Sarah Matthews. I'm not here out of hatred. I'm here because Evan Landers was once part of my family, part of my heart. And when I needed to be believed, when I needed protection, he broke me. And I had to rebuild that life alone, piece by piece. I'm not standing here to demand justice. I'm standing here to remind everyone in this room, justice doesn't start with a courtroom. It starts when we stop being silent." The room went still. He looked at me no longer defiant, just small, shaking, staring at someone he no longer had power over. I turned and walked away. Each step was a closing door. When I returned to Oregon, there were no letters waiting, just a soft golden afternoon, a small apartment, and a phone call from the Women Rise team, inviting me to be a keynote speaker at their National Anti-Abuse Conference. I said yes, by the window. A breeze slipped through the white curtain. I stood there, looking into the mirror, no longer the vacant-eyed woman who walked into that house 3 months ago. No longer the girl whose hand shook while holding a remote. Just me whole, steady, strong that Christmas. I didn't leave because I was unwelcome. I left because I chose not to live in denial anymore. No one brought me home. But finally, I had found a place where I truly belonged.